We buried my mother at 3. By 4 I'd found the ledger that could bury us all. I was still pinning the veil to my mother's hair when I saw the bruise they'd hidden with winter rose makeup. A thumbprint pressed high on her temple like a seal on wax. The undertaker had shaded it carefully, but the light from the chapel window slid over it, the way all light slides over truth, too gentle to change anything. She fell down the stairs, my brother Jacob murmured to anyone who stood near enough to ask, his hand firm on my elbow, guiding me through the line of mourners. A tragic fall. We were good at tragedies in our family. We were raised on them like bread. Aunt Ruth waited until the last condolences had drained and the church emptied to the hum of a vacuum. She pressed something cold into my palm, a small key on a blue ribbon, frayed at the edges like something loved too long. "Don't sign anything today," she whispered, "and don't let him throw the ledger away." "What ledger?" I asked. She didn't answer, and in the absence of answers, Jacob took over. He always had a talent for filling silences with signatures. The will reading was set for 3 o'clock, as if grief could keep time. Mother's lawyer, a man with a watch he checked too often, clicked through clauses that named gardens, accounts, and heirlooms. The house, our house, a Riverstone Tudor stuffed with the breath of 4 generations, went to Jacob. I was given a cedar chest and sentimental items of no appraised value. The lawyer slid an envelope across the table, my name in my mother's hand. I waited for the room to breathe out before I breathed in, then I opened it. Inside was a note. "My Mara, there are debts that don't appear on any bank's books." I wrote them down where I could bear to see them. "The ledger is in the house. The key will know where. Please read it before you hate me or forgive me or both." The key. Ruth's ribbon in my pocket. It felt suddenly heavy, as if letters had weight. When I looked up, Jacob was watching me. If there was fear in his face, he trimmed it into something like pity. "She always did love her little scavenger hunts," he said. "Don't get lost in one, okay? We have a lot to do." He turned to the lawyer, his voice moving easily over the word probate, already making a future from my mother's ending. I caught Ruth's eye. She nodded toward the door. The house was a few blocks away uphill. Every step a memory I didn't want. Mother called the room with the window seat the good room, as if the rest of the house were guilty. I grew up reading there, listening to her footsteps move like weather through the hall. The good room watched the street, the neighbors, the blackberry tangle where we'd lost a kite and a cat and our first version of mercy. It watched the staircase landing, where the banister gleamed with years of hands. It was on that landing they'd found her. It was on that landing my father had turned, 15 years ago, and kept walking out the door. He had left a coat and a coffee cup, and a silence we obeyed like law. He'd left 2 children and a woman, who ended up knowing everything but what to do with knowing. I tried the key in every lock I remembered. Old drawers. The cabinet that kept the holiday china, each plate clinking like a grandmother's laugh. Finally the bookcase. The second shelf from the bottom had a false back, one of those tricks Mother thought made her sentimental, not secretive. The key turned. Wood shrugged open. The ledger was wrapped in a dish towel, the cheerful kind with cherries and script recipes. When I lifted it out, dust rose in a soft gasp. The cover was pebbled black, the kind high school bookkeepers used. On the first page, my mother's careful hand, debits and credits, and beneath it a date, May 14th, 15 years ago, the day of the storm, the day the car spun, the day the papers said accident, and we swallowed the word because it tasted better than all the other ones. The day a boy from the next street, Micah Boone, shy 16, stopped breathing after a hit on the wet road that no one could prove was ours. I turned pages. It wasn't money she'd tracked. It was choices. June 3rd, spoke to Sheriff Lowry. Gave him the Polaroid. He will misfile the report. Debt owed, justice. Credit taken, time. June 5th, paid for new fender cash. Hide the receipt. Debt owed, truth. Credit taken. Children's sleep. June 12th. Told Mara that Jacob was the driver so she'll stay angry at someone who can hold it. Mara is too tender to carry her own blame. Debt owed, daughter's innocence. Credit taken, son's ruin. My eyes stung. The words crawled across lines like ants. I kept turning pages, each entry a stitch I could feel pulling through old skin. August 1st. Told Jacob to let her hate him. He says if I love him I wouldn't. I do. That is why I must. October 9th. Anton called from the motel. He says he cannot hold this house together, if it is built on rot. I told him I would drag it upright, even if it splinters me. He left anyway. Debt owed, husband's departure. Credit taken, the children's cover stays intact. So the old argument I kept in my head, good daughter, bad son, was a story she'd written for us. A lie she read to me so I could sleep through my own truth. I remembered the rain, the blur of taillights, hands shaking on a wheel, the smell of copper and wet wool. Me, not him. My stomach turned, as if it wanted to reject the past. I had been told a version of myself I could stand to live with, and I had believed it. I had built my revenge on a foundation of mercy I didn't understand. I was halfway through the entries when I reached the last page. Newer ink last week. I told Jacob I'm going to the DA. He begged. I used to think begging was weak. Then I became a mother, debt owed. Micah's mother's life, the years she counted without him. Credit taken, everything else. Yesterday he grabbed my wrist on the landing. I pulled away. I am very tired. If I fall, tell Mara I did it, because I couldn't carry both the truth and the lie up the same staircase anymore. Debt owed, a full ledger. Credit taken, none left to claim. A footfall on the hall carpet. I closed the book too quickly. Dust flew. Jacob stood in the doorway, and for a heartbeat, with the afternoon light behind him, with the house holding its breath, he looked like our father at 35, trying and failing to keep us together by giving us space. Then his face changed back to habit. I told you not to get lost, he said softly. And yet, did you push her, I asked. I didn't know what answer I wanted. He stared at the ledger. Slowly, his shoulders caved inward, as if he'd been waiting to be asked and didn't know how to stand now that the question was real. No, he said. She pulled away. He swallowed. She was going to tell the DA today. I was trying to make her sit down. I should have... He let the sentence die because anything you put after should have is an accusation you give yourself. I wanted you to stay angry at me, he said. Because if you were, you wouldn't turn it inward again. And if you turned it inward, I was afraid I'd lose you. His voice wavered. She asked me to carry the hate. I said yes. I thought I was strong enough to hold it. Turns out hate is a liquid. It leaks into everything. I couldn't keep it from touching you. What about Micah? I asked. The boy with the gap-toothed smile. I could see him in the way he kicked his skateboard against our curb like he was knocking on our door. We never paid him back, Jacob said. Not with the truth. I held the ledger like a relic. Ruth had appeared behind Jacob, a small figure, hands twisting in her dress. I told her years ago, she said, voice thin. Told Lila to tell you what you did. She said you wouldn't survive it. That you were made of glass. Ruth's mouth trembled. I didn't believe her. Then I looked at how you carried sorrow. I thought maybe she sees something I don't. I was 15, I said. I could have carried it. You were 15, Ruth repeated. That's the kind of age where a soul decides whether it can bear to live with itself. The house seemed to listen. It had always listened. It kept our secrets like a second spine, rigid and painful. Come with me, Jacob said. There's something you should hear. The intercom had been in the hallway since before we were born. Little brass grills in the walls for passing plates and calling children. It hadn't worked since Father left, or so we'd assumed. Jacob pressed a button under the kitchen panel, and static hissed through the house like a breath being held too long. Then our mother's voice, thin as if she were speaking from the far end of a tunnel. Don't you see? I can't die having never told the truth. Jacob's voice, younger in the echo. A boy man pleading, Mom, wait, just sit. Please, sit. I'll drive you. We'll do it together. No, I already asked you to carry too much, she said, and then a sound of scuffing, a gasp. A soft thud that the house had already learned to translate into a kind of prayer. The recording fizzled. The silence afterward had corners. I put my hand flat on the panel, as if touching it could reach through time to a wrist that wouldn't pull away. But she had already pulled. She had spent 15 years pretending she could balance an entire family on a lie. She moved to set the ledger down, and the ledger set her down instead. Jacob leaned against the wall as if to keep it vertical with his weight. Call the police, he said. Or don't. Tell the DA yourself. I won't stop you. The choice sat between us like a blade on a table, useful or dangerous depending on what you meant to do with it. I will tell them, I said. The words were heavy and right. But first I'm going to see Micah's mother. The Boone's front porch was smaller than I remembered. Grief sometimes shrinks the world down to one chair. Mrs. Boone, old now, crocheted throw across her knees, looked at me with eyes that still measured each day against a boy who stayed 16. "I should have come years ago," I said. "You couldn't," she replied. Simple as weather. People do the things they know how to do at the time. Sometimes they learn later. I was the one, I said. "I drove." "I was a child, but I drove and I—" She lifted a hand. "I know who you were," she said, and the sentence startled me with its mercy. "Lila came here a week ago. Sat right there," she tapped the armrest. She'd lost weight like the truth had been feeding on her. She told me. She asked what I wanted. "What did you say?" I asked, afraid of the answer. Prison, papers, punishment that couldn't return anything. I said I wanted someone to look me in the eye and not look away from what happened, she said. I wanted the story to be the shape it was, and not the shape it was made into. She breathed in, slow. "I wanted my boy's name said out loud in your house." "I can do that," I said, and felt how small and how enormous the promise was. She nodded. Her mouth pinched, as if bracing for the pain that comes with even good things. "The rest," she said, "belongs to the law and to God, and to whatever you make of your own life now." I told her about the ledger, about how my mother had measured love in debts, about how the numbers never added up to the sum of our sins, and still she tried. Mrs. Boone listened like someone who'd been in church long enough to know the difference between confession and performance. "People think revenge is a circle," she said. "It's a sinkhole. You don't go around. You go down." She patted the blanket as if smoothing a bed. "Go home, child. Start being honest at the table. See what grows from that." We met in the kitchen, the room where the intercom had taught its last lesson. Ruth made tea with shaking hands. Jacob stood with his back to the sink, a position that looked like surrender. I said Micah's name. I said it again. We said Father's name too, as if by saying him we might invite him to step back into the doorway he'd left. We said Mother's name and it softened in the air, the way names do when they've finished being anchors and have become instead a kind of wind. Then I called the DA. My voice did not tremble. It sounded older than it had even that morning. "I was 15 when it happened," I said. 15 when I accepted the story I was given. "I'm 30 now, and I'm ready to accept the one that's mine." I told him about the rain, about a skateboard abandoned on the curb, about a ledger filled with the arithmetic of love and fear. I told him about our house, and how it held onto the truth like breath held underwater, eyes wide, waiting. After the call, we stood in a circle that felt new despite the kitchen's old tile. Jacob's face was puffy from held-back tears. When he reached for me, I let him. He was not the villain my mother had made him to protect me. He was my brother, flawed as I was, neither of us measuring up to a story that had too much math in it for human hands. "What now?" he asked, his voice raw. "Now we do the small true things," I said. "We tell the neighbors who want gossip that we have grief instead. We bring flowers to Mrs. Boone without pretending flowers fix anything. We sell the house if it makes us sick to live in it. Or we don't, but we stop pretending the ledger is how love works." Ruth wiped her eyes with the corner of an apron. "And we forgive your mother," she whispered, "for trying to save you with something that kept hurting you." I thought of her note. "Please read it before you hate me or forgive me or both." "Both," I said softly. "I think I'll do both." We held a second service, smaller and harder. No roses. Just truth. I read from the ledger in the church's side room, the one with the good light. I read the entry where she lied to me in the shape of love. I read the last line she wrote before the stairs. People flinched. People cried. Some turned away. Some leaned in. Ruth squeezed my shoulder. Jacob stared at his hands. When I finished, I folded the ledger closed and placed it on the altar. The reverend who had baptized us and married half the town put his palm on the cover and bowed his head. "We bring to this table what we cannot carry alone," he said. And for once the words did not feel like paper. They felt like stone and bread and breath. After I walked home the long way, the blackberry bramble had taken back part of the sidewalk. I let it scratch my ankles. I thought about sinks and circles, about how the sum of a life doesn't erase any particular number, even if you learn how to add differently. In the entryway, I looked up at the landing. Sunlight collected on the step where her foot had slipped. I put my hand on the banister. The wood was warm as if the house had a pulse. I carried the ledger to the backyard. Jacob met me there. We sat on the back steps like children who hadn't yet learned the shape of secrets. "We could burn it," he said. We could, I agreed, but maybe we don't make another fire we can pretend warmed us. Maybe we put it in the library's archive box, under town histories, so the next girl who thinks she has to carry a whole family's fate alone can see what that does to a spine. He smiled, small and real. You always were better with words. You were always better with apology, I said. Let's both be better with truth. That night I wrote a letter to my father. I didn't ask him to come back. I told him where the ledger was. I told him the door would be unlocked at dinner time and that there would be a chair for him if one day he wanted to sit in it again. I told him I would understand if he didn't. I told him I had learned that love is not a balance sheet. It is a series of choices that don't always add up. A willingness to say the real thing, even when it makes the room smaller, before it makes it larger. Before bed, I stood at the bottom of the stairs. The landing was just wood and air, nothing mystical about it, but I felt my mother there, not the architect of our ruin, not the martyr of her own plan, just a woman who had tried. I decided to honor that by trying in a different direction. In the morning, I would take the first set of copies to the DA, sit for the statement, put my name into the record in the place that had left a blank before. I would bring coffee to Mrs. Boone, not as payment but as a morning, ordinary and shared. I would tell the neighbor children to look both ways. I would tell the truth to mine when I had them. I would pick a different heirloom than secrecy. I switched off the hall light. In the dark, the house made its old sounds, but they didn't scare me. They sounded like a ledger settling on a shelf after being read all the way through. They sounded like the end of a story that made room for the beginning of a life. Was this helpful? Give it a like, subscribe for more, and share this with one person who'll appreciate it. New videos every day. Thank you for watching.